Hey, what's up, everybody? This is SnackBox. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, guys. The fusion is coming to an end, and Plarium is not wasting any time. We have a summoning event every day of the week. As you can see, all the summoning portals are glowing. And let's take a look actually, what do we have active now? We had another progressive chance event yesterday where they announced the wrong champions, one wrong champion for the Void Shards, which was not Ieyasu, it was Alacanon or whatever his name is. I forgot, or Valcanon? Yeah, I think Valcanon was right. But yeah, so let's actually take a look. What do we have now in store? Really, really cool champions. Aelstrid was a fusion, really good, a really good speed booster. A lot of people use her in Arena, use her in Hydra. Really good overall. Let's actually take a look at the kits in the index. So unfortunately, as you can see, I don't have her because I wasn't playing when she was a fusion. What a nice design. Now, she has a chance to place a sleep debuff on her A1, which is big. We know that, right? We have another speed booster that can do that, and that's Sifi. So really cool. It's not a 100% chance, but still, if you book the A1, it's a 75% chance. And if the target is under decreased speed or weaken, placed by this champion, has a 100% to place sleep. So basically, you have 100% chance to place sleep, but only if you place decreased speed and weaken with this champion. Her A2 attacks all enemies, has a chance of 100% to place decreased speed and weaken if it's booked, a free turn cooldown, and decreases the turn meters of all enemies by 15%, so really good. Turn meter control. And her A3 places increased speed and increased attack on all allies for free turns, also fills the turn meters of allies by 15%, and then grants an extra turn. So basically, you boost the turn meter, you buff attack and speed, you get an extra turn, and then you decrease the speed of your enemies and decrease the turn meter of your enemies, and that's basically how she turn meter controls in the arena. Now, whenever this champion or an ally has a turn meter increased, heals all allies based on their max HP. The percentage value of the heal is equal to half of the turn meter increase. So this is actually pretty strong. She's not only a turn meter booster and a debuffer, she's also a healer, and she has a speed aura in arena, so pretty good overall. The next champion was actually the fusion before this one right now, and it's Thor. Now Thor is really, really good overall in the game. You can use him basically everywhere, same as Aelstrid. He can be good in Arena, he can be good in Hydra and PvE content. He does an incredible amount of damage. So his A1 attacks 2 times, has a 20% chance of repeating the attack. Each hit decreases the target's turn meter by 10%. Not that interesting for Hydra, for example, but for other PvE content and arenas, not that bad. A2 attacks all enemies. After hitting the initially selected enemy, all other enemies will be hit in a random order. Each subsequent hit following the initial hit will increase the damage inflicted by 25%, and this stacks up to 100%. Will ignore block damage and unkillable buffs. This effect does not work against bosses. Really, really strong attack, does a lot of damage. Then his A3 attacks all enemies before attacking, places 50% increased attack and 30% increased crit damage buff on this champion for 2 turns. So he's a self buffer, which is really strong for, arena. Just helps to provide the buffs, and you don't need another increase attack buffer. So that's really good. Has a 75% chance of permanently decreasing the resistance of each enemy by 10%. Stacks up to 50%. Also has a 75% chance. I mean, this can be booked up to 100%, right? So it has a 100% chance of placing 30% decrease speed debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. His passive: every time this champion deals damage, increase the thunder counter by 1, stacks up to 10. Each thunder stack increases this champion's damage by 3%, and this stacks up to 30%. Once the thunder counter reaches 10, attacks all enemies and places a stun debuff for one turn. After the attack, the thunder counter resets to 0. So this passive is really, really strong. You can, 30% more damage, like raw damage. That's a crazy passive. Like overall, just a crazy nuker. If you went for the fusion, it's not so interesting for you to pull him in this progressive event. So yeah, basically really strong. If you didn't go for the fusion, or like myself, I missed it because I just came back to the game like shortly after, or like at the end of the fusion, it might be interesting for you. Then we have another Sylvan Watcher, and it's Glaycat. Also a really, really good champion overall. Really cool looking with the wood, the tree-ish design and stuff. I really like it. So here we go. A1 is a 2-hitter. Each hit has a 35% chance of placing a freeze debuff. If the target has 50% or less, this debuff cannot not be resisted. So it can be booked up to 50%, and it hits 2 times. So actually not that bad, right? A little bit of control on the A1. Why not? The A2 places 50% increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns. Also has an 80%, can be booked up to 100%, chance to place a perfect whale buff on all allies except this champion for 2 turns. Then fills the turn meters of all allies by 15%. Really cool. Actually, this skill kind of reminds me of Duchess, just without the block debuffs, but with a turn meter increase instead. Then we have the A3, revives all dead allies with 40% HP and 25% turn meter. Also places 50% increase accuracy buff and 60% increased defense buff on all allies for 3 turns. These buffs will be placed even if no allies were revived. If no allies were revived by the skill, grants this champion an extra turn. This is actually a really, really good skill, so it can, serve as a revive skill, or you just buff your living champions, and then he gets an extra turn and can place the perfect whale and increase attack. So basically he provides 4 buffs in total, and this is actually really, really strong. Now, he can be good in arena, of course, but I think the best place where he will shine is Hydra, because he's providing 4 buffs, and if you put him in a 9-piece protection set, he will give a decent damage boost to your team. Then his passive: allies under perfect whale buff placed by this champion deal 10% more damage. Allies under a perfect whale buff placed by this champion deal additional 10% damage to enemies under whale or perfect whale. So you get an additional 10% damage just by placing perfect whale on your allies. So that's 10%, and if you have them in a 9-piece protection, that's 20, so 30% more damage just from this one champion is insane. Really, really strong. And then the last one is also a fusion. Kind of have a lot of fusions in this event. And it's Brogni. Now Brogni is really, really old actually, but still good. Not in the end game that much, but if you're like early mid game, he can be really helpful. He has a kind of like not even that bad of an A1. He's really PvE orientated, so he has this 45% chance of placing an HP burn debuff for 2 turns. This can be booked up to 60. Then he has an A2 where he attacks all enemies and has a 75% chance of removing 1 random buff from all enemies. Has a 75% chance of removing 1 random debuff from all allies. Increases the value of shield buffs on all allies by 30% of the damage inflicted. This can be booked up to 100% and is a free turn cooldown. It's not a bad skill, honestly. Now, a lot of people don't build him with accuracy, but you definitely can, as you can see, to utilize his A1 with HP burn and to remove a random buff from enemies. Otherwise, if you're not planning on building him with accuracy, you can build him with resistance, for example, and just full HP. So because he will place a really good shield with his A3 and can increase the shield with his A2. Now his A3 places a block debuffs and 50% increase attack on all allies for 2 turns. Also places a shield buff on all allies for 2 turns, equal to 30% of this champion's max HP. The shield buff cannot be removed, so it's protected, which is really, really good. And as I said, you can extend or like increase the shield with the A2 of Brogni, and his passive is also really interesting and has a synergy with the shield. Whenever an ally under a shield buff is attacked, reflects 25% of the damage inflicted on the shield back to the attacker. Also heals that ally by 25% of the damage inflicted on the shield. If there are multiple champions in the team with this skill, only one will activate. So he provides a lot of survivability. I really used him a lot when I was, progressing in Doom Tower and stuff like that. Even in Faction Wars or dungeons, he can provide a decent amount of buffs, increase attack, defensive and offensive. So he's really, really good. But in the end game, he's not that relevant anymore. That's about it for the non-void legendaries. Then we have Raka. I don't have Raka, but she seems alright. Her ratings are not that bad. I mean, she's a reviver. Let's take a look at her kit. So A1, attacks one enemy, heals the ally with the lowest HP by 10% of this champion's max HP. A little heal on the A1, why not? A2, removes all debuffs from all allies, then places 50% increase attack buff and the shield buff equal to 25% of this champion's max HP on all allies for 2 turns. Also not that bad, a cleanse. Now I personally prefer cleanses that like cleanse and then put a block debuff on your champions as well, but it's a heal with the shield and an increased attack, so why not, right? It doesn't sound that bad. A3, revives all dead allies with 50% HP and 50% turn meter. Then places a block debuff buff on all allies for 2 turns. Will place the block debuff buff even if there are no dead allies. So instead of having the block debuffs on her cleanse, which would probably make her even better, right? She has it on the revive, which is also not that bad, but honestly I would probably prefer the block debuffs on the cleanse and have the shield buff, for example, on this on the revive. I think that would make more sense, but overall, just not bad at all. She can carry you through Faction Wars, for example, and other areas of the game. Her passive, an active effect, at the start of each turn fills the turn meters of all allies by 10%, which is really, really good. And then a passive effect, at the start of each turn places 15% continuous heal buff on the ally with the lowest HP for 2 turns. Will not place the continuous heal buff on this champion. So a really strong support champion, as you can see. Turn meter boost, revive, buffs, heal, she does it all. And if you put her in a relentless set, I can really see, uh, I can see her, be very strong. Then we have another Void champion in the progressive event, which is probably one of the best speed boosters in the game, and it's no other than Shuzen. So Shuzen, I have her myself, and I use her every time, every day in arena. She is so much fun, and the reason for that is her A2, which targets an ally if the target ally is not under a sheep debuff, places 50% increased attack buff, a 30% increased crit rate buff, and a 30% increased crit damage buff on them for 2 turns. So basically, if she's your fastest champion, you can instantly give a turn to your damage dealer and buff his crit rate and crit damage and attack and let him do his thing. There's also another case if the target ally is under a sheep debuff, removes it from them. So she's probably one of the only champs that can actually, I don't know if there's another one that can actually remove the sheep debuff from a champion, but honestly, I don't know if it will change the outcome of the match. If your champion's already got sheep, you kind of like, in a bad spot already, and I don't know if you can recover from that with this skill. But, at least there's an option. Her A1 is also pretty strong. It has a 30% chance, which can be booked up to 50, of placing a block active skills debuff for 2 turns. Now, block active skills are really insane at the moment because it's kind of like the only way to lock down mythical champions because they can't, switch their to their alternate form or their normal form. They just can't use any skills but the A1. Also has an 80% chance, which can be booked up to 100% chance to steal 20% of the target's turn meter if the target is already under a block active skills debuff. So basically, once you put that block active skills on that enemy and you use this A1 again, you steal turn meter, get your turn back quicker, and you can basically lock down one champion just with Shuzen. Now her A3, also a really good turn meter manipulation skill, fills the turn meters of all allies by 20% and places 30% increased speed buff on them for 2 turns. This is really, really strong. 20% is a lot, and a 30 big increased speed buff inclusive, so really good. And also has a 100% chance of decreasing the turn meter of all enemies by 20% and placing decreased speed, a big version debuff on them for 2 turns. So you're buffing your turn meter, buffing your speed, decreasing enemy turn meter, decreasing enemy speed, and it's a 100% chance. You don't need to book it technically, just need to book it if you want to reduce the cooldown, which can be reduced to 4 turns from 6 turns. Then her passive increases this champion's accuracy equal to the amount of speed they have, which is insane. So basically you don't have to focus on accuracy, you just focus on speed. Of course you want accuracy, some accuracies, like more accuracy is always better, but technically you don't need to, you just focus on speed and she will increase her accuracy as well. So overall, a really, really cool champion. One of the best turn meter manipulation champs there is, and she has an incredible arena aura, which increases the ally speed by 30%. So these are the champions for today. Now let's take a look at the progressive event for tomorrow, which can be seen in the news here. So as you can see, we covered Tuesday, and then we have the second schedule from Wednesday, which includes Nude, Mishinaki, Nekmotar, Kaioku, from Ancient, Sacreds, and Primals, and then Taras and Riho Bone Spear from Void. So I don't think I have to go over all these champions, but I'm gonna do it real quick. So Nude, one of the best max HP damage hitters in the game, has a triple max HP damage hit on his A3, and that's why people really love to use him. He also places counter attack on himself with his A2 and attacks all enemies, where he can place decreased attack and weaken, which has a 100% chance if booked. He also has a triple hit on his A1, where he decreases the target's turn meter by 15%. If the target's turn meter is not decreased, each hit has a 100% chance, if booked, of placing a freeze debuff. So one of the best Fire Knight champions there is, or max HP hitters, really, really strong. Then we have another Shadowkin, which is Mishinaki. He was a MVP damage dealer, and probably still is, for Hydra for a very long time, and people still use him actually. So his A1 attacks one enemy, has a 50% chance of placing HP burn debuff for 2 turns, and this can be booked up to 60%. His A2 has a chance of 100% if booked to place a big version of decreased defense and decreased attack on enemies under hex debuffs. And on his A3 he has a double AoE hitter, which the first hit removes all buffs from each target, and the second hit places hex. So he technically does provide a lot of damage, because he provides the hex debuff, and then he also provides a decreased defense and decreased attack debuff, and can place an HP burn on his A1. And his passive, whenever an ally attacks an enemy under hex debuff, this champion has a 50% chance to team up and join the ally's attack. So he will deal so much damage and boost your damage because of his passive and his AoE attacks. He will debuff, place hex, join your other allies for an ally attack, place HP burns, and just do so much damage. So really, really strong for Hydra. Then we have an Lizardman, which is Nekmotar. He was a fusion as well. I use him personally in Hydra, but I'm definitely looking for better options. And but yeah, his A1 attacks all enemies, has a 40% chance of placing a big version of decreased attack for 2 turns. The chance increases to 75% against targets under debuffs. So this is a really, really good A1, because you have such a high chance of placing a big version of a debuff. In this case, it's decreased attack, and this is really, really good, right? Because, for example, in Hydra, the Hydra heads most likely have a debuff most of the time, right? So it basically is a 75% chance at all times, and that's really good for an A1, and it's an AoE hit. Then he has this A2, which is also an AoE attack, and it has a 100% chance, if booked, of placing a big version of decreased speed and a leech debuff, which can provide survivability and heal for your team. But the decreased speed buff is probably the most important thing here. And then he has his A3, where he places increased speed big version on all allies and fills the turn meter by 30%, which is huge. 30% turn meter fill is really, really good. Combined with an increased speed is so strong, and he grants this champion an extra turn. So basically he would use this, buff the turn meter, buff the speed, and then get an extra turn, and decrease the speed of enemies and place a leech. So this is really good. You boost your team, you decrease the speed of the enemy team. Really, really strong. You can actually, build him with a hex set or a provoke set, for example, or a stun set for other PvE content, and he will just do amazing. His passive fills his champion's turn meter by 5% each time a debuff on an enemy is removed, transferred, or expires. So overall, a really cool champion. You can build him fast, and he will just, outlap anybody. So that's pretty cool. Then we have another Shadowkin, which is Kaioku. I have her, but I never really used her. She's kind of like a legendary version of Seeker, just a little bit different. Let's take a look at her A1. Attacks one enemy will place 3 hits if the target is under 3 or more debuffs. Each hit has a 50% chance, if booked, of placing a big version of Weaken. So, not that bad of an A1. Kinda, relies on the enemy to have 3 or more debuffs to get the full potential out of it. But a big version of Weaken on an A1 is not bad. There's not a lot of champions that have that. Now, the A2 is an AoE attack and has a 100% chance, if booked, of placing a 50% decrease attack on all enemies for 2 turns. So, decrease attack with an AoE attack, not that bad. After attacking, has a 100% chance, if booked, of placing an HP burn debuff for 2 turns on all enemies that this skill did not place decrease attack. So this is kind of weird. I kind of wished if it would just place the HP burn together with the decrease attack, that would make her so much better. But in that case, I would probably most of the time prefer the decrease attack instead of the HP burn. So that's kind of a weird skill, but it is what it is. Then the A3 places a 50% ally protection buff on all allies except this champion for 2 turns. Also places a block damage buff on this champion for 3 turns, then grants an extra turn. So this is also a really interesting skill. Can provide a lot of survivability for PvE content. You basically protect all your other allies while Kyoku doesn't get any damage due to the block damage buff. So this is really cool, actually. Nice synergy. But let's take a look at her passive. Every time this champion is hit with a critical hit, heals all allies by 15% of their max HP, then places 60% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. So this is really a really cool skill, which is what I meant when I said this reminds me of a legendary Seeker, because she places that big version of increased defense if this champion is hit with a critical hit, and she also heals all allies. So overall, a decent champion, but she kind of looks better on paper than she actually is. Like, she's not performing as good as she, as the kit reads itself. So not bad, but not as good. Then for the Void Legendaries for tomorrow, another Shadowkin. It's kind of like Shadowkin week or something. So we have Riho Bone Spear. A really, really good champion. Was a guaranteed Void Legendary, if I remember correctly, a couple years ago. And, a lot of people use her in Sand Devil and other areas. She's just, a really, really cool champion. So let's take a look at her A1. Attacks one enemy, places a 15% continuous heal buff on the ally with the lowest HP for 1 turn. Also places a small continuous heal buff on all allies with 30% HP or less for 1 turn. So a little bit of heal on her A1, nothing too crazy. Her A2 places a stun debuff on a target enemy for 1 turn, as well as a HP burn, decreased defense, weaken, decreased attack, and a decreased crit rate debuff for 2 turns, then attacks the target. So this is this skill is insane, because she just hits the enemy once, which is so good for Sand Devil, but places all these debuffs, right? So this is why she's so good. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 debuffs, which is insane. Then we have this cleanse on her A3, which removes all debuffs from all allies, then places a block debuffs on them for 2 turns. Also heals all allies by 35% of their max HP, and by a further 5% for each debuff removed from them. So as I said, this is the type of cleansing I prefer on a champion. Removes debuffs, places block debuffs, and heals them. So, and it's quite a big heal if you remove a lot of debuffs, so really, really good. And then she has this unique passive. When receiving any debuffs instantly transfers them from this champion to the attacker, which is so good. This is actually really, really strong. So overall, just a nice support champion. Debuffer and cleanser and healer. And then we have one of the best arena nukers in the entire game. Why am I looking in barbarians? I always think this guy is a barbarian, but he's actually a Bannerlord and I don't have him. And it's Taras the Fierce. So I think everybody faced him at least once in the arena. And let's take a look at his kit. His A1 is a 2-hitter, has a 40% chance of placing decreased attack for 2 turns. This can be not booked up actually. Each critical hit fills the turn meters of all allies by 5%. So this is actually insane because you will build him with crit and he will boost the turn meters of all allies by 10% every time he uses this A1. So really, really cool, and he does smack really good. This damage is based on HP, so this is also insane because he's really tanky. His A2 attacks one enemy, places a stun debuff for 2 turns, deals double damage to enemies whose attack is equal to or higher than this champion's attack. Whenever an enemy attacks Marichka the Unbreakable, attack that enemy using this skill. And the damage based on HP. So basically he will always do double damage to attack champions because they have more attack than him. And the damage is based on HP as well. And he will always, counter attack kind of if Marichka is on the same team when she gets attacked. So this is really an insane skill. Then his A3, this is his, his go-to AoE hitter. Attacks all enemies, damage increases by 15% for each buff on allies. Then increases the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn. Heals this champion by 5% for every buff that had its duration increased. Restores decreased max HP equal to the amount of any surplus heal. So this is insane. 15% for each buff on allies. That's crazy, That's so crazy. He will do such a massive amount of damage. Then he has one passive here, which has a passive effect. When attacked, decreases the enemy's attack by 10%. Stacks up to 50%, 25% against bosses. Occurs once per skill. Attack reduction resets after each round. So not only is he, healing himself, he's also, reducing the damage of the attackers. And then the active effect places a fear debuff on all enemies from the Orcs, Ogryn, Tribes, Undead Hordes, and Demon Spawn factions at the beginning of each round for 1 turn. This debuff cannot be resisted. Also a really annoying passive if you're using, champions like Siphi, Rotos, Warlord, Demon Spawn, Duchess, and so on. Really, really annoying because this debuff is not, you don't need accuracy or anything, it just can't be resisted. The other passive, all incoming damage from skills is reduced by 50%. So, like this, honestly, I think he should be nerfed. I think this should be nerfed to like 25% just to make it a little bit, not that crazy, because 50% is really, really a lot. And when attacked, this champion's max HP will be decreased by 25% of the attack's initial damage. But this doesn't matter because he will just survive and then nuke your the whole team, right? So that's basically just crazy, this damage reduction skill. And then he has this 24% crit rate aura in all battles. So just an amazing champ. Even if you don't have Marichka, he's still insane. So now we covered all the progressive chance events, and we have one more event that is active right now, which is the Prism Shard event, where we have a headline champion with a chance of 2%, Hansel Witch Hunter. crazy. Everybody's so hyped about this champion that probably nobody's using his prism shards. But the legendaries that you can get here are actually not that bad. We have Thor in here, which was just a fusion, one fusion ago, and he's also part of the progressive event, so that's kind of weird. We have Wukong, one of the best legendary nukers in the game. We have, the Big Bunny, also really, really cool champion actually for Hydra and PvE content overall. And then we have Authorion, which was also part of a progressive chance event on the weekend. Horndig was also a fusion. Ash Arrow was also part of the progressive chance event on the weekend. King Garok, which just got a decent buff. He's actually really good now. So if you're looking for an arena nuker, he can definitely fit in that role. And we get the old, nothing too crazy actually. Gwendolyn, I'm not quite sure about her. I think people use her in Fire Knight. But other than legendaries, we also have really, really decent epics in here. Geomancer, one of the best epic in the game, actually. Royal Guard, Farrakhan. Royal Guard, one of the oldest max HP hitting the champions. Farrakhan, a nice ally attacker. Phoenix, a really, really strong A1, does a lot of damage. We have her, Fane, which is a really good champion for clan boss. She does poisons, decrease attack, decrease defense, weaken, a lot of damage. Then we have Deity, which, a lot of people use him in Cursed City. He's really, really good because he gets these extra turns and just, hits very hard as well. Then Neldor, also really good for Fire Knight because he has this A1 which hits 3 times with a chance of placing freeze debuffs. So as you can see, a lot of good champions. Gembo, also really, really good arena nuker and really cool looking. I like the swords, they look insane actually. He kind of looks like a legendary, a really unique style, and honestly he's also performing as good as a legendary champion. So overall, a really good summoning pool. I wish they put the new HP burn demon spawn in here. So yeah guys, that's about it for the summoning events for this week, at least for tomorrow and today. So maybe we will have more summoning events on Thursday, Friday, and of course we will have one for the weekend. But other than that, we have boosted summons on Soulstones, and I'm gonna open some Soulstones in my other video I'm gonna do later. But yeah, that's about it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. If you're going for these champions, good luck, wish you the best, hope you get what you want, and see ya in the next video.